Hello, beautiful homemakers. I'm continuing chapter 12 of Secrets of Fascinating Womanhood. There's only going to be 2 videos for this chapter since it's shorter. Last time we talked about how to show feminine appreciation, and we are on secret number 9, which is to obtain your wants from your husband, just ask with a smile as a young girl asks her father. To obtain your wants from your husband, just ask with a smile and say please. Susan raised her hand and spoke shyly. I believe what you say about asking for things like young girls do. My father still does anything for me that I ask. But if I ask my partner to mow the lawn, he says he will, but most times he doesn't. If I didn't do them, they'd be knee-high. It's the same with most of the other man's work around the house. But he'll soon go and help someone else if they come and ask him. The teacher smiled. I've heard this problem so many times before, Sonia. There are 4 main reasons why a man won't work around your home. FW can overcome them all. First reason, he doesn't have the energy. He may be overworking outside the home, or be in poor health, or he might be heavily overweight. Second reason, he's depressed because of overwhelming problems. Depression saps a man's energy and is a very common cause of apparent laziness. Third reason, he doesn't have the skills or the money to do what is required and is too proud to admit it. Fourth reason, he feels resentful toward his wife and does not feel like pleasing her in any way. Living Fascinating Womanhood should overcome all these reasons for a man not working around the home. Unless your husband is elderly, his health and energy levels will usually greatly improve. And because of this, his income also improves. So if he has not got the skills to do the work himself, he can afford to pay another man to do it. We should appreciate, however, that not all men are natural home handymen. Some men are born organizers, some are artistic, some are highly intellectual. Some work hard in business and professions outside the home, and these types of men often prefer to hire other men to do the work around the home. My own husband is one of these. However, these husbands are exceptions. Most men are capable and learn quickly and get much satisfaction from doing the masculine work around the home. As far as the 4th reason is concerned, when a man begins to love his wife deeply and becomes totally free of resentment toward her, he will go to great lengths to please her. Now let's get back to Sonia's situation. We should not tell our husband to do regular jobs that he clearly knows are his responsibility, like mowing the lawn. He can see when they need mowing. Rather, we should live and apply the FW principles to overcome the 4 common reasons that hold a man back. If we nag him and then end up doing the work for him, he'll have no incentive to change. Now, having said that, we do, of course, need to ask our husband to take care of things that he's unaware of. Let's suppose the tap in the laundry starts leaking. How do we let him know about it and have him to take care of it? It's simple. We just ask him, as a young girl would ask her father in a similar situation. A young girl might say, Daddy, my bike's got a puncture. Will you fix it for me, please? So we could say, in a melodious voice, Darling, the tap in the laundry is leaking. Will you fix it for me, please? And if you don't call your husband darling, start. Or, if you know he hasn't the skills to do it himself and will need to arrange a plumber, you could say, Will you get it fixed for me, please? Now don't say these words to him as questions, but say them in a tone of cheerful expectancy and finality, so that you communicate to him that you trust him to take care of it for you. However, because men often forget to repair things that are not directly bothering them, also put a note somewhere where he'll see it every day, or put the thing to be fixed where he will constantly see it. Don't remind him again unless you're certain he's forgotten. Now, if you've been doing a man's job for years, habits will have been formed. Your husband is likely to be reluctant to take the job back. Most men are lazy to a degree, so here's what to do. First, you must be fulfilling your woman's role 100%. Then say to your husband something like this: "Darling, I don't feel very feminine doing this job. It's a man's work. You can do it so much better than I can." Then let it go. Say no more about it. Turn your back on the job forever, come what may. Don't try and reason with him. His logical male mind will shoot down your reasons one by one. Always say, "I feel." Men find that feminine, if somewhat illogical, and they can't argue with it. Yes, Kathy? What if there's a really big job that you know your husband's been putting off and off, something he said he'll do, but it looks like it'll be years before he gets around to doing it, if ever? Like building the outdoor deck my husband promised me 2 years ago. The timber's been sitting there since last Christmas. The teacher smiled. Well, yes, there is an FW technique for getting action in these kinds of situations. It's a bit cheeky, but we are within our rights as a wife, and our husbands will feel satisfaction when the difficult job is completed. It takes some nerve and a knack for timing, but there's an old and true story that illustrates this technique, and it concerns Abraham Lincoln's stepmother. Abraham Lincoln's mother, Nancy, lived with her husband Tom in a little log cabin with a dirt floor. She was a meek lady, and Tom Lincoln was somewhat lazy. He never got around to building her a wooden floor. She eventually died, and in due course Tom married again. His new wife's name was Sarah. She was a more assertive woman. When Tom brought her home to the log cabin, along with a wagon load of her fine furniture, she took one look at that dirt floor and then said in a pleasant voice, "Oh, my goodness, Tom, I couldn't think of bringing in all my nice things on this dirt floor. I'll just leave them in the wagon, and you can build me a wooden floor tomorrow." Did Tom build her a wooden floor the next day? Yes, he did. Why? First, because she was within her rights as a wife. Second, she was pleasant and feminine in making her request. Third, it was a clear, simple request with a time limit. Fourth, and most important, the furniture sitting outside embarrassed Tom into applying urgency. We can use similar situations in our own homes to have our husbands complete those jobs that tend to get left and left. When visitors are coming to stay is a good time to apply this technique. But always be within your rights. Always be pleasant and feminine. Always respect your husband's authority. Are there any other questions? Yes, said Helena. Sometimes my husband and I will go shopping to look at something he wants to buy for the home or for me, and he likes it, but I don't. How do I handle a situation like that? Good question, Helena. For the answer, let's turn to our young girl and her father ideal. A young girl is honest and outspoken. What would she say to her father in such a situation? She would simply tell him the truth, wouldn't she? She would say, "I don't want that one, Daddy." So we all need to say something like, "Darling, I don't want that one." It's not necessary to give our reasons. Our husband may start shooting them down again, and then feel offended if we don't agree with him. As long as we are honest and pleasant, our husband won't be offended. Remember, he wants to please us. When we're open and honest with him, he knows for sure that we're happy with what he does for us. Now, you remember during our secret number 4 lesson, the one about allowing our husband to lead, I said we would learn in this 9th secret how to give feminine advice. We sometimes need to do this, perhaps when our husband asks us for our opinion on something, or when we can see that he's about to make a serious mistake. We should also speak up if we feel that our husband is not making full use of his ability to do good in the world. Remember, men expect we women to be more noble than them in such matters. God has given women the power to motivate men to rise to greater and more noble heights than they would otherwise achieve. However, giving advice should only be done on rare occasions. Our words will then carry much more weight. Most of the time, it's best to say nothing and to let our husband have free rein as leader. It can be better for us to put up with the consequences of a few bad decisions than to risk wounding our husband's sensitive pride and causing resentment. So, here's how to give feminine advice to our husband, or any other man for that matter, including our sons. First, always use non-challenging words like I feel or I like. Don't use the words I know or I think. Second, phrase what you have to say in non-challenging questions such as, have you ever considered, or do you think such and such might work? Third, always allow him to remain dominant in the conversation. For example, don't draw conclusions from what has been discussed or sum up. Let him feel that he's the leader and you the counselor. And lastly, 3 more don'ts. Don't speak as if you know more than he does. Don't offer too many suggestions. And don't ask too many questions. Well, that's secret number 9, class. How to obtain your needs from your husband and increase his love for you at the same time. Remember, your husband will love you more if you let him spoil you a little. His reward is your childlike, feminine, and enthusiastic response, and his feeling of manliness as you show your pleasure for what he's done for you. Fascinating Womanhood doesn't ask us to become self-sacrificing doormats to our husbands. We give up nothing worthwhile in living these secrets. On the contrary, we gain our deepest, most heartfelt desires. Most of all, we enjoy a warm, loving relationship with our man that just grows richer and deeper as time goes by. Just one pleasant little assignment this week. Assignment secret number 9. Think of something you really want and deserve, and ask your husband for it in a simple, direct, childlike manner. When he has agreed to it, show your appreciation in a lively, feminine manner. Our 2 charming visitors tonight are Valerie and Hinamoa. Valerie, a true experience. After 15 years and 3 beautiful children, our marriage was in serious trouble. My sister introduced me to Fascinating Womanhood. My first impression was, it may work for others, but it will never solve my problems. We had long forgotten the little courtesies extended to each other during courtship and early marriage. We had even talked of divorce. I was the domestic type. Not once in all those years had my husband introduced me or referred to me as his wife. It was always the Mrs., or even worse, the boss. Willing to try anything to save our marriage, I started to live Fascinating Womanhood. Surprising results started to happen. Imagine how thrilled I was when he proudly introduced me to an acquaintance saying, I want you to meet my wife. It sounded like music to my ears. Now, no matter where we go, he can't say my wife often enough. Ours is a happy home now. The children are more thoughtful and happy. My husband has even started bringing me chocolates and flowers and telling me that he truly loves me. Love reigns supreme. I bless the day I heard about Fascinating Womanhood. Hinamoa, a true experience. I was destroying my husband and our marriage by trying to change him. I was trying so hard to change him that love was being replaced by emotional and physical abuse. Of course, before FW, I was too self-righteous and proud to even consider that I was the one who was wrong. Because of my pride, it was hard to take the first step. But oh, how rewarding each step has been. There is a sparkle in his eyes now that I haven't seen since the early days of our marriage. What an unspeakable joy it was the night he took me in his arms and told me how he loved me. It had been so long since I heard those beautiful words. For the first time in years, I'm beginning to feel like the woman I've dreamed of being. Thank you so much, Valerie and Hinemoa. It's wonderful to hear how well everything is going for you both. Now next week is our last lesson. Would anyone like to bring along a cake to celebrate? I'll make us all a cream sponge, said Bev. That sounds nice, said the teacher. But we won't let you eat any of it, Bev, said Cherry with a laugh. We're all going to make sure you fit that new dress your husband's going to buy for you. Of course she can have some, Cherry, said the teacher. You can just run an extra mile afterward, can't you, Bev? How is your running going? You do look slimmer. Bev looked pleased. Would you believe I've lost 3 kilograms and I'm still eating the same amount of food as before? But I eat it mostly for breakfast and lunch and just have a light meal at night. Excellent, Bev. If you really want to speed up your weight loss, just eat the same way you are now, but only half as much food, just like Angela did this week to fit her dress, but especially cut down the white flour and sugar. They are highly fattening. Well, I might just try that, said Bev. We can go out running together sometime, Bev, said Cherry. Let me get fitter first, Cherry. I'm going to ask my husband for a pair of running shoes this week. I'll try out what I've learned tonight, said Bev. The teacher smiled approvingly at her. Then the teacher said, Now, for those of you who haven't yet completed all your assignments, please make a special effort to catch up by next week. Angela felt excited as Cherry drove home. She said to Cherry, If only I had known this secret before. It's so simple. Just a smile and a please. That's the way I used to ask my father for things, and he'd do anything for me. Yes, my daughter even asks me for things that way, too, said Cherry. And I love doing the things she asks me to, as long as it's good for her, of course. When Angela awoke the next morning, it was clear in her mind what she should do. She had pondered for the past 2 weeks on the best way to persuade Ted to come back home to her. She had rehearsed the arguments and reasons she might use. But Ted had always shot down her arguments in the past, as the teacher had so aptly put it. She was thinking of putting her best reasons into a letter and giving it to Ted. But after last night's lesson, she could clearly see now that was wrong. All she needed to do was to simply ask him, just like a child. It would also fulfill this week's assignment. Angela decided she would be bold and do it that very evening. Most of that day at school she was nervous and felt sick with worry in her stomach. She had not had any breakfast and didn't feel hungry. Fears kept running through her mind. What would Ted say tonight? What if he laughed at her? What if he was in a bad mood? What if he got angry with her? What if he'd just found another woman? She wondered if she could still go through with it. Finally, she remembered the comforting power of prayer. She sat on a seat under some trees on the school grounds during the morning play break and offered a silent prayer for courage. Immediately, she felt a negative oppression lift from her. She became much calmer and was impressed to leave it all in the hands of God, come what may. Angela also felt that she should continue fasting from food all day. That evening, after preparing a meal for David and Tiffany, Angela put on her red dress, tied a white ribbon in her hair, and drove alone and anxious to Ted's flat. She saw his van parked up the driveway. The driver's door was open. She said another earnest prayer aloud in her car that everything would work out for the best. Then, leaving her car out on the street, she walked up the gravel driveway. Her heart was beating fast and her hands were clammy. Just as she reached Ted's flat, Ted came out the front door, wearing his overalls and carrying his laptop computer. He was obviously surprised to see Angela, but he smiled at her and put his computer in the van. Then he closed the van door and turned and looked expectantly at her. Angela swallowed, tried to smile, then said in a quavery voice, "Ted, please come home and look after me." Then she burst into tears. Ted was silent for a few seconds. Then Angela saw his lower lip quiver and his eyes fill with tears. Instinctively she flew into his arms and he held her tight. They both stood there hugging and weeping openly. Then Ted lifted Angela up in his arms and carried her inside the flat. "Of course I'll come home, Angie. Of course I'll come home." Tears were still running down his face. "My fridge is broken down anyway," he added with a silly grin. He stood Angela down on the floor, then recovered his composure quickly. "I'll move back tomorrow night, Angie." Then he smiled at her and said, "Isn't that the dress I bought you years ago?" Angela nodded and wiped her eyes. "Oh, Ted, I'll be the best wife in the whole world, I promise." As Angela drove home, the lump in her throat disappeared and she began to feel elated. It all seemed so unreal, like a dream. When she told David and Tiffany that Dad was coming home, David became highly excited and did cartwheels in the lounge. Tiffany hugged her mother and cried with joy. Later that evening, after David and Tiffany had gone to bed, Angela heard what sounded like Ted's van come up the driveway. Cautiously, she went to the door and peeped out. Suddenly, Ted loomed up out of the darkness, lugging 2 suitcases and grinning all over his face. "I couldn't wait till tomorrow." "Is that Dad?" called David's voice from his bedroom. Then David came running out, followed by Tiffany. "Hi, David. Hi, Tiffany. Dad the King's home." He caught them both up together in his arms and hugged them tightly. And that's the end of chapter 12. I'm going to link to FW32, which talks a little bit about how to talk to your husband about relinquishing control of masculine jobs around the house. Bye.